The law comes in and says you don't have to continue to just beat yourself over the head with this and keep taking it back to the dealership to get it fixed.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's time for another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. And here we are again, getting together to talk about cool people doing great things. I'm your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, and today is no exception. We have an amazing attorney, friend of the community, and person who has overcome adversity to being the only female attorney in her specialty. We're going to talk about it now. And my guest today is Miss Raina Bayas. Raina, welcome to the show.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and we talked before, and I'm telling you, we're like kindred spirits.
I think so.
We were literally talking about just some of the things that are outside of our profession, what we focus on in our morning rituals and routines, and even our philosophies. And to have that kind of a connection right away, I can tell what you give to your clients. I can't wait to talk about it. But first, tell us a little bit about you, who you are, where you came from, how you got to be an attorney. Give us a little background.
Okay, so I was born actually in India.
India?
In India. So I'm half Indian, half Chinese.
Okay.
And moved out here when I was 5. Lived in California and New York and Texas. My dad moved around a lot. Graduated from UT in Austin, and then went to law school at Loyola Law School.
Is it fair to say hook 'em horns?
Yes. Okay. It is 100% fair to say that. And then after law school, I was living in Los Angeles, and I started working for a large law firm. So, one of those white shoe law firms where you're representing and defending large companies. And I did that for about 3 years, and I just didn't love it. I didn't love it. I didn't love what I was doing. I didn't have the heart in it, right? We talked about our morning routine. That's where my morning routine started, because it was hard going to work every day defending some of the clients that we were defending. And so I had to make time for myself every morning. I would go for a run or something just so I did something for myself before giving everything to, for the money, basically.
Yes. Isn't that something I've noticed that for myself, my role here at the law firm is to, it's technically COO, but it's so much different than that. It's to pour into everybody that I can at every level of this organization to try to help them be their best while it sharpens me to be my best. And then we can serve our clients our best, our marketing at its best. Like, it all happens. But if I don't pour into me, I can't pour. I run out of stuff. And it sounds like that you were doing that to survive in your early days.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Because you have to have that kind of base to go from so that you're giving to everybody else. That carries on to this day. And absolutely, exactly what I do with my clients. I make sure that I have enough to give to everybody throughout the day by giving to myself in the morning.
So we got to talk about that. Some people may be like, wait, you don't just get up, have a cup of coffee, eat a donut, watch the morning news, and then jump out in traffic to fight the day to get to the day. Like, explain a little bit about your morning routine and what that does to how that drives that fuel into you to get through and take care of your clients.
Yeah, so I read this book by Hal Elrod, and it's called Miracle Morning. And so it talks about 7 different things. It's called the savers. And he did a bunch of studies and looking at all the different ways that successful people are successful. He was like, look, these are the things that you need to do in the morning. And there was it's silence, journaling, affirmations, visualization, all these things.
Exercise, I remember you saying. Yep.
All of these things that kind of get you into the right mindset for the day. Because when you start off by filling yourself up with what you love and being really focused on the life that you want to lead, then everything else throughout the day just kind of follows, right?
Wow.
And so I started doing that. I started waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and doing all of the different savers. There's, 7 of them. And I was exhausted. I wasn't able to kind of keep it up, and I was kind of feeling bad about myself. And then I realized maybe what I need to do is just relax a little bit. Wake up, give myself just a couple, whatever I have time for. So now I've kind of narrowed it down to I wake up 5:30, and I do silence. So I meditate for 10, 15 minutes. And then I journal. I have to journal. And that's really me just getting all of my thoughts down on paper so that I can stay focused. And it really gives me clarity on what's important. So I have a 6 and a 4-year-old. And my 6-year-old doesn't listen. And I think this is the same for every 6-year-old. I'm like, oh, he just does not listen to me. And I get so wrapped up in this during the day that in the morning times, I can reflect on my actions the day before, and I can look at my affirmations and stay committed to the fact that I want a happy household, that I want to raise my kid to have self-worth and self-esteem. And so I write down what I'm committed to. Like, that's what I journal. I am committed to blank today. And it's just one thing that I'm just committed to. It doesn't have to be the whole world, right? But just one thing. I'm committed to not yelling, or I'm committed to not looking at my phone during dinner and stay really focused on him, or whatever the case may be. And that just helps me kind of set the tone for the rest of the day. So then I exercise. I have to exercise in the morning.
And what kind of exercise? What are you into?
Oh man. Okay, so this is old school, but Insanity.
Oh yes.
Oh my gosh.
Shaun T.
Yep,
I have it.
I've been watching it for years.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been like 10 years at this point.
Yes,
You know what I
for
mean?
sure.
It's so great. And then I do Orange Theory, and then I run. I love trail running, and I do some races. Not fast. Just get out there and do it.
Did you ever try Ludicrous, which is the next iteration of Insanity?
No, I haven't.
It became a hit training because he wanted to get that's when that whole movement went down to slow, with the advent of CrossFit and then hit training, everything went down to a period of time that said, hey, you can get more done in less time if you just stay intense. We're going to get your heart rate up. It's going to be about 20 to 25 minute workouts instead of hour-long workouts. And the Ludicrous stuff, it was pretty crazy. So check that out in your Insanity evolution. That's so fun. I
definitely
heard someone say that, Insanity, in a long time. That's so cool. So do you work out every day, 3, 4, 5 days? And I want to go through this so that anyone watching or listening, if they're putting together if they say, man, a morning ritual is what I call it, right? Or a morning interval one, like, what does that look like? So how much time do you spend? How long do you do it?
I think for working out, so I do, 10 minutes of, honestly, it's like 5 to 10 minutes of journaling. Reading is actually one of the savers as well. So that was actually really great because you just make a plan to read 3 pages of whatever book. And it turns out that when you're being consistent about it, you can get through a lot of books. So I'm sure you have some books, actually you seem like you get through the stuff that you want to get through. So some people out there might have books on their bookshelf that, they've been trying to read and they just never can find time for. And so you just put that near your bedside table or wherever you meditate or whatever, read 3 pages. So really everything is kind of short, right? So 5 to 10 minutes of meditation or 10 to 15 minutes of meditation with 3 pages of reading in a book with, 5 minutes of journaling, and then exercise is usually 30 minutes.
Okay.
And sometimes it's 45 minutes, but usually it's 30 minutes.
So good.
And I do it probably, I try to take 2 rest days, 1 full rest day and 1 yoga day. And then the rest of the time I'm either lifting or Insanity or OTF.
So good. And on your journaling, do you go back and review what you've written? I'm famous for writing all kinds of stuff, and I really ebb and flow on it. I've got a whole different procedure I'm working on right now, but then I'm not very good about going back and learning the lessons and reflecting on it. My mind is always so forward, and I think I'm missing something. Do you go back and reflect on what you wrote and that one thing that you're focusing on for the day?
It's interesting. I did once. And it didn't make me feel that good.
It didn't.
It didn't. And so, and maybe it's because I'm really just brutally honest during journaling that sometimes I don't want to revisit some of that stuff that I've kind of
just getting
worked
it
through.
out.
Right.
I see.
Right. And so then I didn't after that. And I want to say, I try to be consistent, but it's, a lot of times I'm not consistent, and that's okay. Yeah. It's not perfect.
Well, at the end of the day, consistency for me means doing something towards whatever is important for you on a regular basis. I had a mentor tell me once, his name is Dr. John DeMartini, and he travels the world speaking and teaching and philosophizing and this and that. And he said, you can only have one priority at a time, only one.
Yep.
And what happens is, and it doesn't mean you can't have, love of God, country, family, job, blah, blah, blah. But whatever is most high priority is what you'll put your intention on. But because of that, something else below it is going to slip. Yeah. And when that slips enough that it needs to go to the number 1 spot, then it moves to the number 1 spot. And I relate that to both of our morning routines. We're both into that there are some days, like some things, like my little Spanish routine that I do, I never miss because that to me is critical for me not to miss. But sometimes I miss a workout, most of the times I don't. But every day has something filling in that block, which is what you were saying, that way we don't have to feel guilty. We know that we are consistent in whatever the primary things were in that time.
Yep.
So beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
So now I could talk about this all day and we wouldn't hear about anything that you do. This just totally fires my jets. But
Yeah.
let's talk about how you decide to be a lawyer. So you're born in India. You
Right.
come over to the States when you're young.
Yes.
Right. And then where does this transition where you decided that attorney was the path for you?
Oh, man. Like most, I think, early 20-year-olds, I just kind of didn't know what else to do. I honestly was like, well, what else do I need to do? I started working. I was a assistant buyer at Foley's. I don't know if you remember Foley's.
I do.
It's part of Macy's
department
now.
store.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So I did that. I was living in Houston, and it just something wasn't jiving, right? It didn't feel right. It was a lot of math, which I could do math, but when you're doing it every single day, I was kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that in college, I loved analyzing text. So literature for me and reviewing text and really getting into the meaning of things and delving deep into word usage and how things go together, that I just loved it. There was something about it that I just really found very interesting. And I'm a very logical person. And so I took a test. Actually, I'll back up. I decided to apply for law school. I was like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to apply for law school. And so I did the whole thing. I applied for law school, took the LSAT. And then right before I went to law school, I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this. How do I know? So I took a couple personality tests. I can't remember what they were, but
Yes.
And I took 3, and out of the 3, I think the top 2 professions for me were lawyer.
Really?
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, let me
Wow.
see this. Let me try this out. And I loved law school. I loved learning. It just expanded my mind and how people thought, and the writing and the research and all of that. It was fascinating, and I loved it. And then I graduate top of my class, or in the top of my class, and I didn't know kind of what else to do. I knew that people had other professions, but if you're graduating in the top of your class, I feel like there's a lot of pressure to go into these larger kind of
Yes.
white shoe law firms.
Yes.
And so that's what I did, just because I didn't know. So then like I was telling you, I started defending. So I worked for this large law firm. I started defending seatbelt and airbag manufacturers in cases of products liability where people have gotten severely injured, permanently disabled, or killed because of a malfunction of their seatbelt or their airbag. And I worked on, and asbestos. I also defended a company that made asbestos. And then I also did insurance defense. So all these 3 things together, it was sucking just the life out of me.
Yes.
That wasn't what I went to law school for.
Right.
And I honestly was like, well, is this it? This is all, I did so much work and I'm at this point.
Mm-hmm.
How is this possible? And so that's when I started getting, I started getting depressed. Then I started writing a lot and doing kind of all of that. And I realized I needed to get out. I couldn't stay in big firm anymore. So I left Los Angeles, and this is a couple years after Eat, Pray, Love came out, and I was like, that's a fabulous idea. Eat, Pray, Love, the book. Who is it by?
And subsequent movie, by the way.
Yes.
Yep.
With Julia Roberts.
With Julia Roberts.
Yes.
Yep.
And I was like, I need to go find myself. And so I left the firm, and I traveled for 8 months in Asia, and I wanted it to be something productive. So I started volunteering. So everywhere I went, I would try to find a volunteer organization that I could devote my time to. It was hard in Indonesia. I went to Bali, of course. That was the first place that I went to. So it was actually very hard to get a volunteer position. I think there's a lot of Eat, Pray, Love women out there doing the same thing. But I met really good friends. And then I went to Cambodia. I worked for an orphanage in Cambodia, and I taught yoga and did some of their kind of back-end paperwork. They were trying to put together like policies and procedures and things like that. So I kind of helped them with that. And then I lived there for 2 months in Cambodia. Then I went to Nepal, and I lived there for 2 months. And I worked at an organization that provided education to human trafficking victims. That was amazing. So in Nepal, the way women report crimes that happen to them, they have to go to the police station, but they have to bring their entire family. And oftentimes, their husband or a male figure in their family is the one who has put them in a situation to be assaulted or be trafficked. And so you weren't getting any reports, right? There were just very few human trafficking reports.
Because they wouldn't go with them.
Right. Well, when the men would go with them, the women wouldn't tell the truth because the person who's doing it is right there.
I gotcha.
So this organization would train human trafficking victims to be kind of paralegals and sit outside of police stations. And then it was two women talking. And so it was okay that the women were talking by themselves and not have a man there. And so the female would then, the victim would then tell this paralegal exactly what has happened. And so then that paralegal would then go into the police station and relay that report. And so then you actually get accurate reports about some of the abuses that these other women were suffering. So that I didn't speak the language, so meetings were difficult, right? But it was an amazing organization. And so I did a lot of just some of their legal stuff. I would apply for grants and things like that. And I loved it. I loved Nepal. I found my people, you know?
Did?
I did, even though I'm Indian and Chinese, but Nepalese are like a mix of Indians and Chinese. And so I look like everybody there. It was great.
So cool. So you get back, and I'm sure you found the Eat, Pray, Love experience it had to have changed you in some way. What were your biggest takeaways from that?
Well, I guess the biggest takeaway is that I left LA, came to Colorado and met my husband 2 weeks after I came here. I was visiting with the plan to move back to LA, and then I ended up meeting him, and I ended up working for an organization here called Rocky Mountain Victim Law Center. And they provide legal services to victims of violent crimes in the criminal justice system. And because of that job, I ended up becoming a prosecutor for 5 years here, which I absolutely loved that job. I really felt like I was helping victims and really fighting for justice. And then that kind of led me to where I am now.
And that's where we're going to focus. Now, by the way, I hope all of you watching and listening really appreciate this story, because so many times we all want to get into the meat of the message. Like, okay, this is talking about lemon law. Let's get to lemon law. But how you get to lemon law, who you are, determines everything on how you're going to do what you do. So I'm sure the people watching, listening have so much that they've already gained from this, that this is now the frosting on the cake, what we're about to talk to. The meat, I think you've already given it. So thank you for that. So let's talk about lemon law.
Yeah.
What does lemon law mean? And I went through some stuff and learned a little bit about it, but can you talk for those who think they know what lemon law is? What products does it apply to? How does it work? Is it state to state specific? Just give some information on lemon law.
Right. So my practice is focused on lemon law, auto fraud, and auto financing fraud. And lemon law in Colorado has to deal with motor vehicles. It's a specific law for people who have bought new motor vehicles and have experienced a lot of issues with them, such that the warranty of that motor vehicle is no longer functioning as it should be. And so the legal system gives them some sort of remedies outside of just, hey, you need to go back to the manufacturer and repair and replace all of this. Mm-hmm. So, an example would be somebody who, this is actually a real case, bought a beautiful new Jeep, was waiting in line forever for this beautiful new Jeep that's a charging Jeep, and spent, over $50,000 on it, close to, I think, $70,000 on it. And he gets it, and he puts it in his garage and plugs it in to get charged, and it doesn't charge. So this whole thing, and Jeep has touted this, right? Like,
yeah.
You can go off-roading in this, and you don't have to worry about gas, and you're never going to run out of gas, and this is so great. Well, so it stops charging, and he can't get it to charge, and there's a lot of other things kind of wrong with it. The Bluetooth isn't working, he can't get the navigation to work, etc. So he brings it back to the manufacturer, to Jeep. They try to fix it. They give it back to him. It's in the shop for a week. This is a $70,000 car, and it's in the shop for a week, and he just got it, So he's like, all right, that's fine. If he's a very reasonable person, gets the vehicle back. A month later, same thing happens. He brings it back. It's there now for 2 months because they're trying to, or maybe a little bit less than that, but they're trying to find a part for it. And there's supply chain issues, et cetera. So now he doesn't have a car for 2 months. Even if they give him a loaner, it's not his car. He's still paying for his car.
Yes.
Right. And so the law comes in and says, you don't have to continue to just beat yourself over the head with this and keep taking it back to the dealership to get it fixed. If this vehicle does not, if it's been out of service for more than 30 business days, or you've taken it back for the same issue 4 or more times, that's considered a breach of the warranty. And now you have the remedy of replacing, making them replace the vehicle with another like vehicle or repurchasing the vehicle. And by repurchasing, I don't mean trading it in, because there's at no point should a client or, a customer of these manufacturers feel like they have to lose money just because they got a lemon. It is a full repurchase for the full repurchase price, including governmental taxes, registration, title, and potentially other things, right? So rental car costs if you had to get a rental car, or maybe loss of use or something along those lines. So the law allows kind of for these remedies.
And does it allow for remedies of, I'm going to use a term that probably makes no sense, but if I'm going through that and I happen to have a Jeep, I have a Jeep Gladiator, I love this vehicle, I'm a Jeep guy, but if I were in that situation, I'd be upset. Yeah. And is there a component of this, and I don't know if you consider it punitive or pain and suffering or all that can be garnered from this, or is it just a transactional exchange of, hey, you messed up the car, you got to buy it back for what I paid for it? Is there something on top of that?
I would say for the most part, out of 99% of the cases, it is just a transactional sort of situation where you don't really get any sort of pain and suffering or mental anguish. There are very specific circumstances that I've seen in case law about mental anguish, and I can't remember the exact specifics, but it has to be pretty egregious, where you can kind of show that you've been to a psychologist for this is really affecting your life, that kind of thing. And for the most part, it is really frustrating and really unfortunate, and people do not like the position that they're in, but it hardly goes to that point. Yes. And I've really only seen that when there's been some sort of finance something, something's been messed up with the finance where you're getting, something, what's the word, dinged on your credit and things like that.
I see.
But it has to be really kind of egregious.
And you've mentioned that this is for new cars. Is there any lemon law protections for someone who buys either A, a used car from a lot, or B, a used car from an individual party? I mean, is there any responsibility for those people to have to honor something, or is it, buyer beware, you buy it as is?
So I'll address this kind of in two ways. One, if there's a manufacturer warranty on it, lemon law in Colorado really only deals with very new cars within the first year of the vehicle's existence. There's the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act, which is a federal protection, and that expands it. And then you can get kind of other remedies for used car purchases as long as it's within the manufacturer warranty range, or something happened within the manufacturer warranty range. So you do have some relief against the manufacturer for a defective vehicle that is used.
But it's at the national level, not the state level.
Right. Now, let's talk about used cars, because I get these calls a lot. So I do auto fraud, and a lot of my cases in auto fraud come from this. Yes, it is very buyer beware. So I will tell everybody that it is very, very difficult to find a dealership responsible for selling you a bad car. You can go into the lot, you can look all around the car, say, I want to purchase this. You take the vehicle out on a test drive, everything's fine. You come back, sign all the paperwork, and you leave, and the check engine light goes off and your engine falls out. It is hard to get that dealer to be responsible for that. I mean, even in that type of circumstance. So it really is a buyer beware. So if you're going to buy a used car, please get it inspected. Get somebody, we've used a gentleman, Norris Schleter from SOS Inspections previously. They will come out to wherever you are and inspect the vehicle, but you want to have that happen, especially.
So it's different than taking it to your mechanic, or is it? Like, no, if I say, hey, I have my mechanic. Okay, so they know what they would look for to help that. If they pass the car, they say, yeah, this looks good, and then something happens, it's not their fault. They could only look at it for so long. It's not the dealer's not going to take responsibility. So the best thing you can do, what I hear you say, is that take it, get it checked out, and then hope for the best.
And hope for the best. Yeah. Hope for the best. I know that there's a lot of service contracts that are being provided. They call them extended warranties, but what we call them in the industry is service contracts, where it's with a different third party. It's not with your manufacturer. It's just with a different third party. I would say be very, very wary of those.
Those can be like $5,000 for these warranties.
And if you look at the fine print, which this is very difficult because you're in a situation where you're probably being hurried along back in the finance room and they just want you to sign all this paperwork.
And 2 other people want the car.
Exactly.
They looked at it this morning.
Especially these days, right? With the way that used cars are. So you want to look at all the fine print, because a lot of times they'll say anything that any defect that the warranty covers is not covered by this service contract. Any defect that existed before you signed the service contract is not covered. Oh, by the way, any negligence. So if you don't get your oil change on the dot and have proof of that every single 3,000 miles or whatever, we're going to deny your claim. Anything that's just inherently wrong with the car. I mean, the denials and the disclaimers basically eat up the entire service contract.
They're onerous, it sounds like.
Very onerous, and it's very difficult to get it paid for. Now, gap insurance is something different. Gap insurance is where you purchase a vehicle, you have a loan out on the vehicle, you drive it off the lot. Obviously, it's lost value just from driving it off the lot, but then you get into a wreck. So the gap insurance will pay for the gap between the value of the vehicle, let's say it gets totaled out by the insurance company, and what you owe on the vehicle. So that has actually been very helpful to people, and I see that come into play a lot.
Yes.
But yeah, it is very buyer beware. Now, there are certain circumstances where I have a little bit of power, and that is there are certain disclosures that have to be made by law. Like if the vehicle has been in a prior accident, or there's been frame damage, or something along those lines, or there's been tampering with the odometer or something along those lines. Those are specific acts that we can then go back to the dealership and say, look, you messed up. You didn't disclose this information, or you didn't disclose that that there was an odometer rollback on this, or you didn't disclose that this had been through a flood, or this was a salvaged vehicle previously. And in those instances, we can maybe get some sort of relief for you, some sort of remedy. But the dealership usually fights it. This is not an easy sort of, they just roll over and give you whatever it is that you want.
Do you end up in court, or most of these negotiations?
Negotiations and arbitration, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
And so when you're looking at these, are you finding, we have a consumer protection division, and you actually know our attorney here. He's an amazing. Great attorney. And I know you guys have worked together in the past, and he thinks the world of you and has sent you a lot of cases as well. Is this a pervasive problem? Is there an intent issue? Because I'm obviously, if Jeep is making all kinds of cars, one of them comes out, it doesn't mean that the entire line of that particular electric vehicle, as you were referring to, is bad, right? It just, sometimes one of them comes out, or one every 1,000 or whatever. Do you find that on this tampering issue that you talked about a minute ago, and I don't know what category this falls under, but odometer stuff, funny stuff in the paperwork, all that kind of stuff, to me that seems more intentional. And so that being the case, is that a rampant problem that people have to watch for, or is it really related to certain dealerships and unscrupulous small slivers? How bad is this?
I think it's hard to say, because there's a lot of dealerships out there, but I also get a lot of calls. I mean, people are calling me all the time about these cases. And because of that, I want to say that it's rampant. You always have to watch out. I tell people, you think that, you go in to buy a vehicle, and you think it's the salesperson that you are supposed to be wary of. And you're kind of coming up with all these ideas about how you're going to get the sales price down and all this stuff. That's not who you need to be worried about. The salesperson is just somebody that you kind of negotiate with. The person you need to worry about is the finance person.
Yes.
When you go in that back room and you start signing all of those papers, and all of a sudden you're talking about extended warranty, this, that, and gap insurance, and this, and, oh, do you want this protection plan? The finance people, they are the salespeople. And a lot of people are very, unprepared to kind of go into that discussion and start negotiating and sticking their ground and trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And you're oftentimes kind of being pressured into making a very, very quick decision. I will tell you that, when car companies, their finance people, when they go and say, we're going to find you the best financed deal, they make money off of the percentage point. So usually the APR that they get back from the lender is lower than what they give it to you as, and they make that spread. So you need to be very aware that they are making money off of every single thing that you sign.
Yes.
They are the salespeople, and they are good.
Yes.
They are so good.
They're trained to do that.
So good. It's like if salespeople do a really good job, that's where they end up in finance, because that's like where you need to be a really good salesperson.
Where does an attorney come into play on preventing having to go back on these lemon law or these federal laws later? Is it a good idea if someone's going to buy a used car or a new car to say, hey, can I see all the paperwork just so that you guys have, because I want to let my attorney look at it or let you look at it as a specialist in this area? Or is there much prevention that can be done in that way?
I think the prevention that can be done is just educating yourself about the different products that are going to be offered to you and making sure that you know ahead of time, do you want this or do you not want this? Do you want the extended, the service contract or the extended warranty, or do you not? Make that decision before you go in so that you don't get talked into it. Make the decision on the vehicle that you're going to purchase. A lot of times the bait and switch still happens.
Yeah, explain bait and switch.
So this is an advertisement that says you can come in and get this particular car for this particular price. And you walk in. This happened to a client of mine. He walks in 2 hours after talking to the dealership, who says, yes, we 100% have this vehicle for this price. He goes in, vehicle's not there. Oops, it just got sold. Sorry. Is that true or not true? I don't know.
Right.
It seems pretty bait and switch to me.
Yep.
So he goes in there, and then they show him this other beautiful vehicle that is not what he wanted. It's more expensive than what he thought. But he really liked it. He did a test drive. He buys it, and the whole thing is just kind of messed up. But the transmission blew within probably 2 months of him having the vehicle.
Wow.
And he had to get the whole transmission replaced. So you just want to educate yourself on the products that are going to be provided or offered to you and whether or not you want to purchase it. And know that there is no return policy. They don't have return policies when you buy vehicles, and there's nothing in the law.
Even new ones?
Even new ones.
So I thought there was like a 3-day to rescind that contract or something.
Nope.
That does not exist.
That does not exist.
Okay.
Carvana, I think, gives 7 days for you to return the vehicle. What happens a lot of times is that these dealerships will give these, oh, no, it's fine, return it within 15 days if there's anything wrong with it. So this happened to a bunch of people that have called me. You take the car, you go out, and all this stuff is wrong with it. They're like, okay, so we're going to bring it back to the dealership and find out. So they bring it back to the dealership, and the dealership's like, oh, we're so busy. Come back in 7 days and we'll fix it. They come back in 7 days. They're like, oh, we don't have the part. Come back in 5 days. They come back in 5 days. Oh, sorry, we're not going to fix it. Right? You're outside of the 15-day mark. And so now all you have is relying on their promise that they were going to fix it. Promises don't.
And if that happens, hard. Is there recourse? Is that when they say, come to you? And they go, wait a minute. They scheduled me an appointment, said this, then they this. This looks to me like they're pushing me outside that 15-day window. If they come to you, do you now have any recourse saying you had the appointment scheduled to come after them, or literally they're hands off?
There's a case there, and you can make arguments for it, but just recognize that attorneys cost a lot of money, right? And in that type of case, you would be maybe looking at $2,000-$3,000 for me to get involved and write a demand letter, speak to them, negotiate with them, that kind of thing. And oftentimes the fix is maybe $2,000 or $5,000, and you don't want to spend the $3,000 and get embroiled into a lawsuit. So that also happens a lot. Now, keep in mind though that with auto fraud statutes, with lemon law, with Magnus and Moss, there's an attorney fee shifting provision in the statute, which means that if you prevail, then you are awarded your reasonable attorney's fees. So there is, and we always ask for it, right? Every single time, 100% I am asking for my fees to get paid, because I don't believe that the consumer should ever have to pay for my fees. It just depends on what you want to settle for. Right? So let's say they come back and they say, fine, we'll fix your car or we'll repurchase your vehicle, but we're not going to give you attorney's fees. You could say, all right, fine, I'll just take that settlement because I don't want to get embroiled in a lawsuit, et cetera. And then you kind of just eat that money. So we always ask for it, but then do we get everything? It just depends on where you are in the process, when you want to settle. And you might, prevail if we take it all the way to arbitration, just know that, you are going to be spending money to go to arbitration. So sometimes it's a risk that people don't want to take. So I will say be very careful on going in and make sure you know what the products are that's going to be offered, if you want it or not. Sometimes it's helpful to already have a bank that's approved you at a certain APR rate so that you don't go in there and have them run your credit and give you something that isn't something that you want with a lender that you don't want to deal with.
Yes.
And go in and get an inspection and try to do what you can on the front side. On the back side, it's different.
It's interesting to me. We talked about this before we started the show. You are the only female doing this work in Colorado,
yes,
right?
That's right.
And we had talked about the stereotypes that can happen and the things that happen to people who are that if we'll call them a bad person, right? In the industry, in the auto industry, if a predator, for lack of a better term, sees weakness and they have unscrupulous tactics, they're going to try to oversell, get over, do whatever they can to get their product sold. With you being the only female attorney doing this, I read through your stuff and you said this has happened to you. They were trying to get over. They didn't understand who they were dealing with, but they were trying to get over. But also people who don't speak English, right? Or people who are either uneducated or undereducated, not only generally, but in this part of the law specific, it makes them suspect. So I imagine it gives you a lot. I mean, like you're fighting for people who can't fight for themselves, whether that's, females, and as in your case, where the auto folks will go, oh, here she comes, watch this, right? Like that has to mean something to you.
Oh, 100%. It's why I get up and do what I do every single day. That it gives me so much purpose to do what I do, because I do feel like I can bring something special. I mean, not only do I have the big law experience where I know the games that these law firms play because I played the same games previously, yes. Right? So I have that experience, but also, yeah, I've been defrauded by, or people have attempted to defraud me whenever I go in and buy vehicles, right? Or get any sort of service done on my vehicle. And I feel for people because a lot of times your home and your car are the two biggest purchases that you can have. And usually your home is fine. It's not going to fall down and you could still use it once you buy your house. Whereas a car, it can really break down. And once it breaks down and it's put into the shop, you're SOL, you know? I mean, right. And then what do? You've spent all your money already on this vehicle. What are you supposed to do? So I feel for these people, and it makes me fight extremely hard for them. And I feel proud of what I do and what the firm does.
These folks, whether it's by the way, segue quick, are insurance companies ever involved in any of this fraud, waste, abuse type stuff against consumers? So let's say you have your auto insurance carrier. They're separate from the transaction that you're buying, but do they do anything that falls into what you do as an auto insurance, or is it far more at the dealership, finance, that whole level?
I would say that the times that I've had insurance involved is when a vehicle has been, there's been damage to the vehicle while on the dealership site. Okay. So let's say you go in for a warranty, whatever, and one of the service techs backs the vehicle up into something. That has definitely happened before. And so then I get involved with the insurance portion of it. But for the most part, this is against the dealership. And then the dealership can then bring in their insurance.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Obviously, if there's a large payout or whatever they kind of want to do with that. But I go up against the dealership.
Got it. And what about private parties? What message would you have to someone other than, again, take it to either use an inspection service or take it to your mechanic? If someone's buying a car from a private party that they find online or something like that, or they know a friend, any words of wisdom?
Private parties are held to a much less standard, a lower standard than the dealerships. The dealerships are licensed. There's a licensing body that regulates them. There are certain laws that regulate them, whereas private parties don't necessarily have that. So if something happens with a private party, when you go after them, you really have to find out whether or not that private party has money, because you're not going to be able to sue somebody that doesn't really have any money.
Yes.
So I would say be very, very careful when it comes to private parties. Now, in the past, there have been private parties that have been basically acting as dealers. And so there's a dealership, right, that's not licensed. And so there could potentially be some recourse on these larger private parties that basically sell a lot of vehicles but just haven't gotten their license. But for the most part, we don't deal with the private party side of it.
Okay. So here's a different private party question that just popped into my head. If let's say I go to buy a car from a private party, is it possible, not that they would do this, but is it possible for me to write a contract to say, hey, I'm going to pay you your $10,000 or whatever for your car, but here's what I want. I want to make sure that, this, that if it happens, it's on you over the next 6 months. And they can say yes or no, and no, I'm not going to take your money or whatever. But is that a legal contract to do between one person and another in a private party?
I think that's a really good idea. I never really thought about that. So if you are going to do something with a private party, definitely have a contract. Now, how you enforce that contract is the other side of it, because, if you have a contract, you can at least go to small claims court. You can at least do something about it other than just kind of an oral, agreement and buyer beware. So I actually really like that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I would suggest that.
For those people out there, maybe try that and talk to the person and say, hey, listen, you've represented that the motor's good. It hasn't had this and hasn't had that. So, if this happens or this happens or this happens over a reasonable period of time, then, we're going to be talking again.
I really like that idea.
Well, there you go. Maybe I'm not even an attorney. Go ahead and use that.
Maybe I should draft up that's a good idea.
There you go. That's cool. So what do you like most about what you do? Because we've talked about a few things. We've got lemon law, and then we've got kind of this abuse of power, if you will, of negotiating folks, giving them the bait and switch stuff. Is there just a favorite part and something that just drives you, besides obviously you want to protect these folks and fight for them because they don't know, but anything else that you really love?
I think two things. One is showing up on podcasts like these and explaining the law to people and educating people. I feel like it's so beneficial to people. And I love it. I love talking about it. I love giving people tips about it. I love it when people call the office and I have initial consultations with them and I can really get into, the law of it. Because knowledge is power, right? And the more power that you have going in, it changes that bargaining dynamic. So that's 50% of the favorite part is that. And then the other 50% is when we can really advocate for our clients and get them what they want. I've gotten some settlements for my clients and they're so happy and they're happy to move on with their lives and they're done with the whole process. And they appreciated the fact that we were there to kind of not only just guide them, but take that burden off of them. And for so long, I have clients who come to me and for the last 5 months, right, they've been talking to the manufacturer or talking to the dealership and getting nowhere and getting frustrated and using so much time and energy that they could be devoting to the rest of their lives on this, topic and this, problem. And for them to come to me and then for me to just relieve their burden so that they can kind of focus on other stuff, gives me so much. I just feel so honored to be able to do that in their lives. And then to get them a result that hopefully that they're happy with.
I totally feel that. Like you can sense it coming, like you feel the energy coming from you talking about it.
Yeah.
What about leasing? Does leasing play anything? Are the lemon laws different in leasing than purchasing?
No, leasing applies to lemon laws as well.
Same exact way. So they would have to give you a new leased car if you had a lemon law and it was in over 30 days of service, it got serviced more than 4 times in the first year, et cetera, et cetera. They would just have to replace it and your lease term would be the same. They wouldn't start the term over. If it took you 6 months to get this resolved, your 6 months would be used on the new car against the lease.
You know what? That I don't know. That last part that you said, I don't know. So the leasing, there's been kind of cases that have said one way or the other. But the way that I read the statute, it does apply to leasing. For Magnuson Moss Warranty Act, it does apply for sure. But the lemon law in Colorado, there's been kind of a little bit of back and forth on it. But I would say that it applies to leasing. Now, whether or not they start your term over, I don't know that for certain. I will say that on a replacement, what I do see a lot is a lot of people have gotten really good interest rates because they bought their vehicle in the last few years. And obviously now the interest rates are much worse. in a replacement, you really have to talk to your lender and see if they would just switch out the
Yes.
right.
That would make
the collateral.
sense. So they're not required to do that?
No. And a lot of times they'll say, no, you have to actually run your credit again because
Wow.
it's been over 6 months or whatever the case may be. And we will give you a different interest rate. And that's hard. That's a hard pill for people to swallow.
That's tough. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they qualified for this much money and this and that. And
Right.
that reminds me of when we look at homes, now the reason it comes up is our home taxes, our tax assessment just came in, and it was certainly different than it was 2 years ago,
Yeah.
right? Like the number went, and you qualify for a home, you qualify for a loan amount, you qualify for all this. But then when these tax assessments go up, it changes that. So you signed up for a 30-year commitment, 15-year commitment, and then everything changes based on this tax assessment.
right.
But what I'm hearing you say is that could be true of a car. If no fault of yours that you got a lemon car and you're dealing with it for 6 months, now you got to requalify, get your credit hit again, and maybe get a different finance rate from what you had before. That's crazy.
I know. It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money because a lot of people had maybe 2.9, 4% APR, whereas now you're looking at 10%. I mean, over the life of a vehicle, that's a lot of money, at least 20, 30,000, depending on how much the vehicle costs. I mean, it's a lot of money.
Yes.
So, I did have a client ask me, could I get that difference? Because it's no fault of mine that I ended up having to get a replacement vehicle. Could I get the difference? We haven't seen it actually battled out in court yet, potentially. So if this is something that people feel really strongly about and don't want to settle unless they get that money from the manufacturer, this could be something that we can push. But it is going to be an uphill battle, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
This has been so interesting. And I know the people watching have had an incredible experience and listening the same. I got one more question for you.
Yeah.
If you had one piece of advice that you have learned along the way or someone shared with you that helps you, just it acts as part of the foundation and fabric of who you are, and it's really important to you, what would that piece be that you would share with us so that we could learn from that, maybe add it to our repertoire as well?
I would say never stray from your integrity. Right? Your integrity is who you are. And when you make decisions that are in line with your integrity, that's when you're at your best.
That's powerful. That's profound. It's simple. It's direct, but so powerful. Raina, this has been amazing for me. I've enjoyed it so much. People may want to reach out to you. They may want to call you. They may have questions about some of this stuff with auto, and it may go a little even outside of what we talked about, but you are the person for them to talk to. How can they get a hold of you?
Sure. So they can go to my website, The Bayas Firm. So I'll spell it out, THEB as in boy, AYAS firm.com. Or they can call me 720-446-0704. I'm happy to talk to anybody, so please call.
That would be wonderful. Well, thank you so much. You are truly making a difference. I hope that the rest of your day goes well. I know that you're helping all these people, and just know that you always have a friend in us here, and we're going to keep sending business your way through our consumer protection. I know that he just thinks the world of you. So, man, thank you for joining me today, Raina. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And for those of you watching or listening, remember, you too can make a difference. I'm sure you've gotten this information somewhere that is percolating in your mind saying, man, I didn't think about that, or that's new. Will you do me a favor and share this with someone? It would mean the world to me and to us if you would help others get the same kind of information, education that you're getting, so that it can help them as well. And remember, until the next time we talk, go make a difference.